Why?
They know that breaking and entering, smashing someone else's property and stealing their property is wrong. It's against the law, it's morally wrong, and the government can only go so far in making sure people understand how they should conduct themselves in a legal and moral manner. And those youths weren't interested in the law or morality and what was right or was wrong. They were just interested in greed and taking goods for themselves.
No, I don't think it's the government's fault. I think it's partly the people that looted, because they were just living off the fact, or they started looting off the fact that they were saying they were protesting against the death of one man, when really it went up and down the country, and they destroyed businesses, people's cars, people's homes, and it was just a very destructive thing that was really uncalled for. And yeah.
What do you think of Plan B's music video?
I'm a bit on the edge if it's justified or not. I understand that he's trying to make the rest of society understand the culture that he was brought up in. Singers like him, Professor Green, they grew up in London on the streets, dealing with the hardships that they talk about, with drugs, gangs, violence, things like that, and he's trying to get his point across that although society looks at them as like they're scum and they're not worth anything, that they do have to go up against these hardships, and life's not as easy for them, but it is also very anti-government, and at the same time they do live off the benefits of the government, but at the same time the government aren't really doing much for them.
It may be that I'm a bit older than his target audience, but to start with, I struggle to understand any of the words. But if I go by the images and some of the words I picked up, you know, it would be largely an encouragement to young people to be rebellious and damage things and, you know, riot and you know, lay all the blame at the door of the government and the authorities and the police. So, you know, I wouldn't class it as very constructive or helpful.
Do you think it glorifies and glams up the riots?
Yeah, my overriding impression of it was that it's intended to almost try and shift the blame for people rioting and committing violence and damage. It's shifting that blame to the authorities and the police. And the basic question is, you know, is that right? And I think that, you know, citizens, proper citizens, know that damage, rioting, aggression is not going to get you anywhere. It never does. So why do it? There's obviously a frustration amongst young people if they haven't got a job, they've got no money, and so on. And that's not good, and the government should try and do their best to help that situation and get rid of that problem. But I think a lot of the people that were rioting weren't on breadline. You know?
The government is the representative of the people, and it is their job to make sure that the best options are afforded to the most people within a society. They have let down the youth and allowed them to be presented and talked about and treated abominably, both by their own policies and by the way in which the media treats them, and they've encouraged the certainly not of British youth throughout the country, but I think it might be a fair representation of certain pockets of the country where young people grow up with absolutely no options, no opportunities, no hope of success. For many young people, a future is probably slightly less bleak spent in prison.
No, they're generalising it to say that all children nowadays are going to grow up like that, they're going to be causing trouble, and that society and the government are going to go down over the next 50 years because of the way that...
No, I don't think so. I think that the majority of young people, depends what you mean by young, but I would say 21 and younger, maybe 25 and younger, but certainly 21 and younger. I think the vast majority are law-abiding and sensible and don't believe it's right to do those things. I think it's impossible to suggest that the majority of young people are inclined to riot, because otherwise there will be riots every week and every day if the vast majority of young people are law-abiding and sensible. But I think there's a disaffected group. I think something probably to do with black culture, maybe ethnic culture. You know, they feel in a minority, and I believe a lot of black youths are almost encouraged by their culture and the attitude of the disaffected few to follow a path of violence and crime and not trying at school and all that kind of stuff.
What do you think the problem is with young people today?
Basically, I feel that it's comes straight from the parents. Basically, they're not ensuring their children go to school and receive a proper education, and as a result of that, the kids are then basically almost forced to go into like this culture where it revolves around gangs, obviously violence, looting, selling drugs and everything like that in order to get away in life. And to go back to a previous comment that Ryan made, they also believe that they are entitled to benefits. People have children in order to have benefits, things like that. They want something from nothing. They don't want to work for anything. They just want everything to be handed to them on a silver platter.
Do you think that's a problem of government, that they hand things to people?
I believe it's a problem from the previous government, yeah, it's not the current government.
No,
Political.
Yeah, I'm going to get political on this one.
I think they should cut back on the benefits. Germany, you can't actually get any benefits until you are complete.
I think the biggest problem is they're being brought up as a product. They're just the next generation of workers. They don't really have a childhood anymore in the same sense that I was privileged to have one, and I believe that childhood is the privilege that is afforded to people that come from the Western world, rich countries. I don't think they're being given much incentive to achieve a lot of the time, because their instant gratification is from the things around them.
Yeah.
And lastly, I think the problem with the youth of today is the grown-ups of today, who used to be the youth of yesterday, and their problem was the grown-ups of yesterday, led primarily by politicians.
I think there's a number of areas. I think some issues are caused by bad parenting. I think particular amongst those is that parents often don't want to take any responsibility for their children, and many of them, if there was a complaint about their child from their school, their teachers or a police officer or some other authoritarian figure as they saw it, they would support their child rather than traditionally and perhaps a few years ago, if a teacher or a policeman complained about a child or a youth, the parents would back the figure of authority. So parenting means really about taking responsibility for your children, where they are, what they're doing, what their values are. And I think there's a lot of parents that just can't be bothered with that. I also think there's certain cultures, probably, young black youths feel disaffected, feel discrimination, feel that perhaps they're not given a fair chance in the job market and so on, and feel that their voice isn't heard. And there's probably some truth to that, same as there might be other groups, minority groups. So there's an element of distress and a feeling of no future. That's a problem with youth for them, but if that translates into violence and crime, then that's not right. I think a lot of young people today, compared to when I was 20 years old, expect a lot more things more quickly. I think they're not totally appreciative of the value of money, of only getting something when you can afford it. They want it all now, and I think that creates perhaps an expectation amongst all youth that if one of their peers has got something, they should have something as well. And I think there's a growing situation where more and more pressure groups promote the idea that the government should sort out all the problems. The Labour Party, when they were in power from 1997, seemed to want to try and micromanage society and look after everyone and provide for everyone. And I think that sends a message out to a lot of people that someone else will sort your problems out. And I don't think the government can. There is an issue, probably, that the youth may not have the respect for figures of authority, Prime Minister, politicians, the police and other people in authority and power, and probably they don't help themselves with some of the things that they do. The police maybe hit people when they shouldn't do, politicians maybe lie or do things when they shouldn't do and they get disgraced. And that is a problem that the youth then say, well, if they're not trustworthy, then who do we rely on? If you boil it down to the riots, the problems, crime, gang culture and so on, to use the challenges of growing up, finding work and having a decent lifestyle as an excuse for crime and violence, rioting and thuggery, I don't accept that as a reasonable excuse to resort to that.
What can be done to help young people now?
To be fair, that question's been sort of asked for the last 15 years and been thrown about between the governments. I think that at the end of the day it comes down to the actual children themselves to look for these opportunities and actually want to do better in life and want to have a future for themselves, as well as coming down to the government that the government need to be giving them the opportunities.
Do you think the closure of some community centres has an effect on young crime and stuff?
It depends obviously how many people go down to these community centres. It's all well and good to say that if all these community centres were up and running, the kids of these days would have somewhere to go, be able to do something, keep them off the streets. But how many of them would actually go there and actually use the facilities if they were still open?
A lot of youths today find that drugs and going and smashing stuff up is a lot easier than living under someone's rule, and that's what you do when you go to these sort of places. You can't play fight, you can't do these sort of things that kids want to do these days, and it's quite tight-nip on the authority chucked around in these places. And if someone would rather go out, smash places up, kicking cars and smoke weed.
Isn't it the lack of authority that's also making the children do these kinds of things? The kids do need some sort of authority in their lives in order to make sure that they don't go out and do these things.
Yeah,
but it starts at home.
Yeah, but if they've already lived with this and they've already had the opportunity to go out and start fights and smoke weed and do all this stuff that they shouldn't be doing, it's not going to be the easiest thing to transfer back to, oh, I'll be a good little boy, I'll go to these youth centres, I'll play chess.
That's why it starts at home. If the parents are allowing their children to go out, if like a 12, 13-year-old boy is allowed to stay out till like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning with kids that are like 16, 17 years old, and the kids that are 16, 17-year-olds are smashing the windows, smashing in cars, robbing people, like holding up with knife point, gun point, everything like that, then the kids are going to feel that that's the in thing, that's what they're going to do.
Yeah, but how can you make these parents do this?
A sense of community is one thing that needs to be created in this country. With a sense of community, that kind of thing stops. Everybody looks out for each other a lot more. Gangs are a sense of community, but it's the wrong sense of community.
Yeah, but with this whole community thing, you're saying gangs are a type of community.
They are a type of community, but a type of community.
Yeah, because they look at the government like they've been treated crap.
What can be done to help violent youth?
The biggest challenge is being able to communicate with them effectively, to have people that they listen to provide support and in particular jobs and job opportunities where...
Give them sticks.
Sticks?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Give them sticks to hit each other with.
Well, how is that going to resolve anything?
If we've created violent youth, then they need to exercise their violence. We would be better to create a youth that were not violent. But we have created a violent youth, and if that's the way it is, then they stick them all in an arena with lots of sticks and beat the living hell out of each other.
Do you think the closure of community centres has contributed to the violence? Possibly being another blame factor on the government?
No, not really. I think that there are people that are brought up and their violent tendencies are encouraged, and those people that are like that are not the kinds of people that go and play ping pong and snooker in a church hall.
Yeah, they're more
So
likely.
shutting down the community centres I don't think would have much impact, but shutting down and getting rid of the youth workers and the people that are out there and dealing with these violent people, yeah. But youth centres is a bit of a middle class.